All right, here we go. Well, good morning. Hopefully, you're having a good morning here. Hopefully, first hour went well for you. And so we will start this Friday here. As I've always started with a Friday, give a little update here. Grades have been updated, at least let's say about 8 o'clock last night. They have been updated. So you want to make sure you check, take a look at your grade. And if there's any problems with it, please let me know. And remember, the deadline is for Wednesday. So let's take care of business and finish the trimester on a positive note and show a full body of work here. So when you look at your grade, you can say, hey, I put my best effort forward. Okay. So with that, Southern resistance had been our focus for the past several days. And so when we look at some like final thoughts of that particular activity, I think our big takeaway is we realize that society still is separated, that there are some political, social, and economic issues that will definitely carry over into the 20th century, that this separation is what we'll call de jure segregation by law, but then also de facto segregation by custom and tradition. And so what we actually enter is a period that is sometimes known as the nadir. All right, so that's a really big word. Sometimes I throw that thing out there, but when we look at the word itself, nadir means empty or dark times, and so this really is a nadir for African Americans. In that, in politics, they're going to really avoid using words like race. In it, and they really will try to sidestep race type legislation, and so the politics really isn't going to take on those social issues related to any of the hangover from Reconstruction, and federal government kind of steps aside here. And so if there's going to be any help, it's going to come from within the African American community. So I've got a little video clip here that I'm going to show that's going to kind of bridge from the Southern resistance to our last activity is going to be on the impact of Reconstruction. And what this video clip is going to do is try to show that there is some other narratives that are going to be told about this time period, and it's going to come from the African American community. And two things will be highlighted in here. One, the power of imagery, and so photography is going to be a medium here for that. Then also, one individual is going to be talked about rather candidly, and that is William Du Bois. And I want to give a little context that there's going to be two African American historians in here. Going to be very candid, very honest about William Du Bois. And so Professor Gaines and Professor West kind of have a casual conversation. So don't be too, I think, surprised by their candid nature of it. Or if you are, I'm giving you a little heads up with that piece there on the candid nature of it. And we'll see if we got some takeaways, and then we'll jump into our last activity for this class period before I let you loose. All right. Anyone have any questions before we look at this video clip here? You can put it in the chat or just verbalize it. Okay, so like when we always watch videos, clips, and this is be about a 7-minute video clip here, 8-minute video clip here. Think of some kind of takeaways that you get from watching this. All right. So here we go. Let me do something.
Culture was devastatingly effective in reinforcing white supremacy.
But African Americans would find ways to combat this onslaught of racist imagery.
Frederick Douglass is a master at understanding the media revolution, and specifically photography. He thought that photography was a way to reclaim your image.
Photography came to this country in 1839, 1840. It was really popular as soon as it arrived here from Paris, the daguerreotype specifically. And Black photographers and white photographers opened up studios, so it became the medium of choice because it was accessible for people.
As Frederick Douglass said, with Daguerre's invention, for the first time ever, the poor servant girl or a slave could now have a portrait of herself that's asked in detail and thus in beauty what the most powerful king or queen could have had 10 years ago.
Photography opened up the doors for a number of families to tell their own stories.
In 1900, a World's Fair opened in Paris. A 32-year-old college professor named William Edward Burghardt Du Bois had been asked to help curate an exhibit on African Americans.
W.B. Du Bois was teaching at Atlanta University 20, 30 years outside of the end of the Civil War. And he's beginning to look at the social life of Black people.
Du Bois automatically recognizes that photography needs to be playing a prominent role in recasting how African Americans are perceived on this global stage.
He put together a remarkable exhibit using photographic representation to demonstrate the progress of the race, but also the beauty of the race, depicting children, men and women in their finest dress, demonstrating that African Americans were dignified, respectable human beings.
There's an image of 4 women on campus of Atlanta University. They're posing. It's a sense of pleasure that I see in the way that they're posing. We see women who are seeing themselves as the new women for the new century. And they understood their sense of empowerment. The exhibition included Civil War soldiers who received the Medal of Honor. And so there is so many stories that change the negative narrative through photography.
The Paris Exposition was just the beginning for W.E.B. Du Bois. 5 years earlier, Du Bois became the first Black person to earn a PhD from Harvard. He was bold, brilliant, and deeply concerned about the increasingly desperate plight of his people.
He comes from Great Barrington, Massachusetts. He's this incredibly gifted intellectual. He was obviously an imperfect man, was a sexist as was commonplace in that period, was an elitist, but that he's certainly one of the founders of Black studies as a field.
Du Bois is the lion in the path of everybody who thinks about these questions. He's a singular figure. He writes that in his journal at age 25, that he's going to try to defeat white supremacy.
Du Bois has been one of my heroes since I first read his masterpiece, The Souls of Black Folk, when I was 19 years old. He's been a guiding light for me and for other Black scholars.
Cornell, at what age were you first exposed to W.E.B. Du Bois?
Oh, let me think. I must have been about 16 years old, reading Kierkegaard, a little bit of Karl Marx, and lo and behold, there was W.B. Du Bois' Souls of Black Folk.
What were your impressions? What was it like when you read The Souls of Black Folk?
Well, I was too young to fully appreciate its genius, but it was clear that his highfalutin language was something I had to wrestle with. it was clear that the subtlety of his mind, the nuanced formulations that he put forward had something to do with what it meant to be a human being in black skin in a white supremacist civilization like the United States.
He did. Du Bois famously said, "One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two warring ideals in one dark body." And we call it the metaphor of double consciousness. Tell me about the metaphor of double consciousness. How important was it? How original was it?
To be a problem, to be cast as a problem people rather than just people with problems. All human beings have problems. But when you're a problem people, your humanity's called into question. You're homogenized. Each black person is interchangeable, substitutable. And so Du Bois says, lo and behold, this double consciousness is one in which we still know we're in America, but not of it, aspiring to be an American, knowing that you are here longer than many Americans. You know, America really ought to be celebrating Du Bois every day, because if black people had produced a different kind of intellectual leader, a leader who said, you terrorize us, we'll terrorize you. You hate us, we'll hate you. America wouldn't exist as a democracy. It fast a long time ago.
Some leader could have declared war. Said, we are in a state of war.
Absolutely.
We're going to fight back.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think you would have gotten along with Du Bois?
I would have loved him, but I loved that Negro at a distance. I got too much Curtis Mayfield, Richard Pryor, Smokey Robinson, Aretha Franklin in me. You know, he didn't appreciate blues. He hated jazz and so forth. He's not my kind of Negro, but he's the greatest black scholar in the history of the country. I think he's the greatest public intellectual in the history of the empire.
Yeah.
He's too elitist and highbrow. That's not my thing.
And very stiff. I tell my students that Du Bois is so arrogant. He slept in a three-piece suit, man. You know.
Du Bois became a leading figure in a generation of African Americans who came of age during the rise of Jim Crow. They called themselves New Negroes for a new century, and they were intent on reconstructing the image of their race.
This new Negro, this person born in freedom, is educated. You have people who understand that they are to be leaders. The mantra of the time period was to be of service to the race.
The talented 10th is a theory that Du Bois puts forth, which is the idea that 10% of African Americans at this time period would be exemplary, that they had a social responsibility and an economic responsibility to lift up everyone else.
Black women are coming into their own politically, and they themselves preach, right, that they are the essential agents in the fight against Jim Crow going forward.
On the one hand, oppression is real, but on the other hand, what is equally real are the institutions like churches and schools and the rise of clubs and fraternities and sororities. And all of that is giving Black people a sense of what's called self-help.
The New Negro generation.
Okay. Does anyone have any thoughts on that little video clip here? Any immediate reactions? You can either put in the chat or you can verbalize your thoughts. Tough crowd on a Friday. Okay. So when I think of that video clip that I just showed you, if the United States government, if state governments were not going to step in and help out, and if they weren't going to be necessarily be part of a story that was going to be propped up, that it's going to have to be done by themselves. And so you see that there are going to be some early leaders that do emerge, like William Du Bois. But he's not going to be the only voice. There's going to be other voices out there. One person I did not bring into that video clip was Booker T. Washington. He will present an alternative to William Du Bois's message. But looking at just that little clip here, some other takeaways is this idea of presenting themselves as their image is a counter to perhaps what the mainstream might think of them during this time period. And so you see that come out in the photography, but it will also come out in literature, it will come out in the arts, it will come out in music as well. And then when you look at William Du Bois, he is part of a group that is known as the Talented 10, and the role of the Talented 10 in trying to uplift the rest of the community. And that is an extraordinary task that is going to be confronting them. But then the one historian had said that that you also have to look towards the churches, you have to look towards the fraternities and sororities, the college campuses. You have to look at some of those other institutions, Black institutions, that are also going to play a role here as well. And then she also highlighted the fact that women are getting involved. All right, this is the end of the 19th century. Women's suffrage movement and women's movement is starting to become more organized, and African-American women are becoming part of that as well. All right, so I think that's just a little statement of services of a bridge into our next activity that we're going to focus on. And so you want to open up impacts of Reconstruction. All right, so you just go to week 5. Hopefully you opened up the impacts of Reconstruction. I want to make sure that before we leave today that we have a good understanding of it, and please interject when you are confused or put things in the chat so you can totally understand. Because you know, Ms. Seiden and I, we like to throw an assignment at you that may be non-traditional, and this is going to be one of them. All right, so with that, we found out that Reconstruction had officially ended in 1877 with the Compromise 1877. That decided a presidential election. Rutherford B. Hayes becomes president, and federal commitment to Reconstruction begins to be reduced. Troops definitely come out, and legislation begins to reduce, and assistance begins to be reduced, and states, especially in the South, will take over the direction of Reconstruction. And so what would the end of this era mean for Blacks in the United States socially, economically, and politically? And I alluded to that a little bit in that they might be on their own. This is like the nadir here. And so ideas of self-help will be the idea or the modes to advance at this point. This is a CYOA, or Choose Your Own Adventure here. And so I'll explain that a little bit more at the end, what that really might mean, because I didn't put any examples on here to show what a CYOA is. You'll determine your format. This is a summative activity, and it's worth 35 points. So this could be a game changer at the end. If you want to maintain your A, you gotta definitely do this and put your best effort forward here. All right, so what must you do? Well, you are going to address all 8 of these questions. You know, why does Reconstruction end? Now, we know that there's a compromise, but really, what is also contributing to its end? So you got to think about the Southern resistance activity. You got to look at the Reconstruction plans perhaps in there as well, and definitely some of these topics below will help out. So what are the social impacts? What are the economic impacts? What are the political impacts? What does the end of Reconstruction mean for future growth of the United States, and probably more specifically future growth for African Americans? Your BHQ here is your big historical question is, in a nation where racism was high, how did Black communities survive, grow, even thrive in some areas? And so again, that's really what we look at. That video clip I showed you kind of gives you some insight into that area. And then finally, the theory of knowledge, or the TOK type question in regards to human limits. When is enough enough? And sometimes when I think of that one, during the civil rights movement, there is a civil rights leader by the name of Fannie Lou Hamer, and she's quoted at times as saying, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." And so where do you get to a point when enough is enough and something needs to happen? And it doesn't necessarily have to relate to the this time period. It can be just about life in general. When is enough enough? You know, think of the current pandemic going on. You know, when is enough enough? I know we are perhaps starting to get a little frustrated, maybe a lot frustrated and all that stuff. You know, think about that when you answer that particular question as well. So how do we answer those questions? Have to do with these topics. And so list below are topics you should use. Must include at least one of the topics listed in each response to the question above. All right, there's not one topic that's going to cover all 8 of these questions. So you're going to have to use the ones that work best to help address these questions here. All right, and so when we talk about like that, requires you to perhaps maybe do just a quick look to see who some of these individuals are. All right, William Du Bois is on there, but you'll also know that there's Marcus Garvey, Booker T. Washington. They're going to have alternative views to William Du Bois. You have Ida Tarbell, you have the HBCU, which are the historically Black colleges and universities, which are being started here at this time, mainly because traditional colleges' doors are shut, so the HBCUs are being created, and they still are in existence today. And one could say there's a renaissance going on with the HBCUs. Black newspapers. So if the mainstream newspapers aren't gonna print the stories, voice still needs to get out there. The NAACP, all right, so the National Advancement for Colored People will be created. Anti-lynching laws, violence toward Blacks, the Frederick Douglass 1893 World's Fair speech. I've already read some bits of that. Race riots and lynching. Yesterday, I had that interactive map that I showed you about the lynching. Supreme Court case, which was mentioned, both of them really are mentioned in that Southern Resistance activity. The slaughterhouse cases in Plessy versus Ferguson, which highlight that 14th Amendment. Sharecropping, tenant farming, redlining, and racial covenants, housing discrimination. So again, when we look at things like, let's say the economic impacts, there's a number of these in here that speak to that. Would be like Booker T. Washington, or the sharecropping, tenant farming, or like the redlining and the racial covenants. Those are speaking towards the economic impacts here. And when you talk about like violence that is going on, so when we're looking at perhaps maybe like the social impact, you to look at, you know, maybe perhaps like people like Ida Tarbell and the anti lynching campaigns, and that can also be for political as well. So some of these also could be covering multiple questions up there, but you just gotta be sure that if you're using, let's say, William Du Bois a couple times, that you are specifically addressing that aspect of the question. All right, any questions up to this point before I kind of reveal a little bit of what does create your your own adventure look like? Any questions? And you can verbalize it or you can put it in the chat. All right, I'm going to assume silence means you know everything. Okay. And this will be a piece of cake assignment here. So what does create your own adventure mean? Well, when we look at the due date's going to be Wednesday, November 25th. All right, that's when it's due. So you might want to write that down, November 25th, which is a Wednesday. I believe that is. Hopefully, if it's not, someone's going to correct me with that. All right, so you got that piece there. Sources to look at to help you put this together. You have your textbook, The American Pageant, but we also have a number of links there as well. You can also do the GPS of this as well. So, and you can jot down some of these ideas of what it perhaps means. And I can also jot this down in the chat, create your own adventure. And what that could mean is you put together a blog that answers all 8 of these questions, all right? And it can be a blog on each of the questions. You can create a digital scrapbook, right, as a possibility here on all 8 of these particular questions. You can have a nice podcast, but if you're going to do a podcast, you got to put some illustrations in it and address all 8 of these questions as well. You could do an iMovie, and this iMovie could be, you know, like a spoken word. All right, you might be good at that. You could do a spoken word, or you could create a newscast. All right, but I'm gonna preface. You know, when you do like podcasts and iMovies, I'm not looking for like 60 minutes here. I've had a group in the past give me a iMovie that was 60 minutes about a different topic, and it was riveting. It was really good. Had some commercials in it and stuff, but that's a little over the top. All right, so we're probably looking at maybe, you know, I guess 15 minutes perhaps, 20 minutes the most, minimum 5, 6, 7 minutes, something like that. All right, so let's keep it in perspective when you do that. You know, you could create your own newspaper, right? There's ways to do that. You could take advantage of using some social media, you know, create what might look like a Twitter account or an Instagram account. All right, so you can make it almost like social media look there. You could probably do political cartoons. All right, but that can be a little chaotic, and so you could create like 8 political cartoons, or a political cartoon that integrates a lot of these concepts, but there might be a need for a lot of captions. All right. And some could be like a menu here, where each of these questions in some ways can be a type of item that you find on a menu that you would see at a restaurant. You know, you got your appetizers and you got your entrees and you got your dessert, and so some of these things could fit in. You know, the economic impacts could be an entree, and you explain it a little bit in that way. All right, so that's what we kind of mean by create your own. So you see that really, if you want to get you know, shoot for the really super far-reaching assignment here, these are the things that we're looking at here. I'm not saying you can't do like a traditional Google Slides or an Adobe Slate, something like that, or a PowerPoint. But I'm looking for you to really challenge yourself here. All right. Google Slides may not necessarily bring you the 35 points. Adobe Slate page may not necessarily bring you the 35 points. All right, so I want you to really challenge yourself here on this one. And you might say, oh, come on, Mr. Newcomb, it's the end of the trimester. I can't really focus on challenging myself, but I'm saying, yeah, you're going to need to try to challenge yourself with this. Okay, I threw that out there. Hit me with the questions. Or you might be in shock and awe right now. Wow. All right. So, please always ask if there are questions. Send me a little note, little email, or stop in office hours. You can set up an office hours appointment, and we can chit chat as well. You can email me later in the day. That's fine. If we need to set up a Google Meet later in the day, that's fine as well. Do not put this off, though. Do not wait for the last minute. You kind of get what you get when you put it off. So you want to make sure that you start right away. Do your research. Figure out your topics. Figure out your approach to what your finished product might be. Then just dig in and immerse yourself. You have till Wednesday of next week. Plenty of time for success. Okay, so with that, my concluding thoughts to you is it's going to be a nice day, perhaps again in the neighborhood. And so you might want to take advantage of that, kind of use that as a little break. But also remember that you do have some formative assignments that needs to be completed, and you need to take care of that. And you also need to start this summative assignment. So you're going to want to make sure you give yourself some time with that. And if there are questions or concerns, always reach out. I do want to extend a huge thank you to all of you for being very patient and understanding as we're dealing with some of these technology issues earlier in the week. It was very frustrating, but I appreciate your understanding and patience during this time as well. So with that, I'm going to say you have a good day, and you can check out if you would like.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day too.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too, Gavin.